guys, welcome back to our podcast, Man with the Shot of Dopamine. I'm Armando.
I'm Shy.
And today's episode, we'll be talking about Barbie. Let's do our initial thoughts. What did you think of this movie?
Okay, so when I first saw it, I did not like it. I gave it a 6 out of 10, and I feel like I was being really nice about it. It didn't hit for me. Like, it really didn't. I just felt like, I was talking about it with one of my friends, and I was like, it just seemed like a movie about white feminism.
True.
And then she mentioned, it's like, this is going to sound controversial. You're going to get canceled. She was saying, like, it's a movie to give white women something to be mad about. And that's how I felt. Yeah, literally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even though it's about, like, white women, for the most part.
It's about women, but it's showing through the perspective of a thin, blonde, pretty white woman. So it was a little hard to relate to. I didn't relate to it at all. Yeah. Honestly, there was
Me
only
neither.
Shut up. What's it called? There were just some scenes that actually did hit, but it was just like they were so close to getting to that point, but they missed it. Yeah, they touched it, and then they just.
That's what I was telling Carla my girlfriend, when we first watched it together. I was like, you have these really serious moments, but like you said, they pass by so quick.
Yeah.
There's no like focus on it, so it's really just easy to dismiss.
Yeah, I just felt like they just touched bases and they kind of moved on. And I'm like, okay, we're talking about the patriarchy. What about the patriarchy?
Right.
And then I was listening to some TikTok, and I literally searched up her name, but I forgot. Her name is Liv. We'll post it later. I don't know. Whatever.
We'll give her credit later.
Yeah. What's it called? She was talking about how like you have to change your perspective on it. You have to view it in like a symbolism way, where it's like Ken isn't representing men. Ken is representing like how men want to view themselves or how they see themselves, the sense of masculinity, and that's why it's like it feels so campy and all of that because it's such a broad, vague like aspect. It's like make believe, it's imaginary. Like,
yeah, I know. Yeah. For me too, is like the first time I saw it, I didn't really have any expectations for it. Honestly, I didn't expect it to be good, but I didn't expect it to be bad, which it wasn't. I thought it was really funny, and I think that was obvious from the get-go. So I kind of just went in thinking, oh, this is going to just be a fun, quirky movie that probably has no meaning to it. But after watching it and then like getting on TikTok and watching even videos that you sent me afterwards, it's like, okay, there's a lot more depth to this movie than I really think if you go in with a different perspective, right? Because it's like I said, even for me, it was so easy for me to go in with okay, this is just a silly movie, that's it, and walk out.
Yeah.
But then you get into the details of the patriarchy and like even like you said, the masculinity for these guys and like how it can lead to insecurities that we see in these movies. Like it's a whole different shift in mindset.
Yeah.
But
I think the entertainment like value really goes on the person who watches it because it's like when we were talking about it, you were like viewed it in a much more like carefree way, and I was like more in a political way. I was like not really a big fan,
which is why I love talking about movies with you because that's my initial mindset. Okay, I'm gonna watch it for what it is, and I know the first time you watch it, you're like, okay, what can I pick at these movies, which I love,
I'm just like, because like we're seeing all these like negative reviews. It's really just like about like how conservatives are mad that they're not very manly. So I've been hearing all these things, and then I kind of go in and I was like, I understand their perspective. I feel like they missed the point too. But it's like, I don't know, when you see these things, it just felt so like, I don't know, the patriarchy isn't a joke. Like these things aren't a joke, and I felt like they're making it into a joke almost like to minimize it. That's how I felt. But again, you have to change your perspective on how you watch it.
Sure.
Because when I watched it in a different perspective, I was like, oh, it's not bad. It actually, like, my 6 out of 10 went to a 7 out of 10. Like, I enjoyed it a lot more when I viewed it in more of, like, a carefree kind of attitude and try to enjoy it for what it is. So it's, like, it really just depends on your perspective. And it's, like, it's not a bad movie. It's just not for everybody,
So this is probably an obvious question, but do you feel like we know this movie is already past $1 billion, right? Which is, it's making a lot of money, and I can see why. But do you think that that's because most people are going into it thinking it's just with a carefree mindset, as opposed to thinking about patriarchy?
Well, I think it made all the money because of their marketing. That's really it. They fucking marketed the shit out of this movie for a year. Like, they obviously, because of the pandemic, the production was delayed, but they really pushed this movie. Like, we saw it everywhere.
I think it's crazy too, because I don't know if I mentioned to you, the weekend that it was coming out, Barbie was projected to make, I think, 100 million, and Oppenheimer only was projected to make like 50, which I think is a crazy gap.
Yeah.
It is. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But I don't know. For me, I kind of wonder why I know marketing has something to do with it, but even then, it's like, why did Barbie make so much more? I mean, we can talk about that when we can talk about that when we talk about Oppenheimer, but even like it's still like I would have thought it would have been the opposite, honestly.
I feel like we heard about when this movie was coming out, it wasn't really for kids. It was more for like adults. Like it was that borderline kind of like you can bring your kid, but it's not. They're not gonna really
Be
get
warned.
it. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
they're not really gonna get it, or like the actual meaning of the film. So I feel like millennials are very attached to nostalgia. Like
Yeah.
I feel like out of all the generations, millennials are super super attached to it because we're in that kind of limbo where we're seeing the transition, but we don't really want the transition. So I feel like that's why it really did make more money. Because who are we seeing going to watch this movie? It's not kids. It's all the adults.
all the adults.
My mom. My mom literally refuses to watch Barbie because some woman posted her birthday party and it was like her 40th birthday and it was a Barbie theme and she's like, what the fuck is this? Like, you are 40, grow up.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, I feel like it just hit that soft spot for people because people love Barbie. I collected Barbies. So you know, that's why it feels like you're connected to your childhood.
Sure.
But when we're going to talk about the movie, I feel like, again, they missed a lot of points with like childhood and Barbie. You know, I feel like what's it called? I'll mention this early. I don't think kids really felt insecure with Barbie when they had it. Insecurity,
until later on.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like then they start comparing themselves to a Barbie, or it's even the idea in media that reflects to like what they own, or like they're gonna project. They're like, oh, this pretty blonde girl's on the cover of a magazine. My Barbie's a blonde like girl. So what am I? I'm a
Yeah.
brunette Hispanic girl. You get me? So
What am I gonna do?
Yeah,
Like,
it's like I'm not them. So I feel like, you know, they're really saying like in the film, like women really care about Barbies. Like this is like this icon. And I'm like, well, it really wasn't like that. It
Yeah.
was almost like we talked about it before. It's like almost like an escape from the reality. Like, you know, reality is already traumatizing enough, and I feel like kids played with dolls just to escape that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that more towards
yeah,
the end.
for sure. Let's get into the movie. It starts with the desert scene, and the monologue is actually it's narrated by Helen Mirren, I believe, which I think was a perfect casting for this choice. So yeah, it starts in a desert scene, and she kind of explains that throughout time up until Barbies came out, little girls only played with baby dolls, and because of that, they can only really play the role of a mom. And it's funny. It kind of shows how like they're kind of bored of this whole repetitive cycle of playing mom, right? And then out of nowhere, we get this giant-sized Margot Robbie as a Barbie, and she winks at the camera, and the little girls go crazy, like breaking their baby dolls and stuff like that. I just thought it was really funny. It started a new wave of stuff, you know, like kind of how you mentioned. There were different types of Barbies, and girls, I think, no longer saw themselves as moms; they saw themselves as these Barbies, right? And after that, we enter Barbie Land, and everything is pink. Naturally, right? Everything's pink. Everything's perfect. Margot Robbie wakes up, and she like goes about her day. The dream houses, which is I guess their imagination of what their house would look like. They're open, first of all, so you can see everything. Like, you can see through the walls, everything that they're doing, which I think is kind of weird. But whatever. Like, there's no privacy, but whatever.
Tell me you never owned a Barbie without telling me you never owned a Barbie.
Well, okay. Anyways, she's going about her morning routine. She gets into the shower, but like everything's so artificial. Like, there's no water coming out, but she's taking a shower. She gets her breakfast and makes toast, but like everything's perfect. Even the butter like slaps itself on the toast. She sits down and pours out her milk and she drinks it, but like, there's nothing in it. She literally like levitates off her house into her car. It's basically driving itself, and like it's so artificial and perfect. But like, it's Barbie Land, so it is what it is. But they also have this whole idea of like because they believe that because Barbies came out, they fixed the world, and that's why their world is perfect.
And it's like everything that they think will happen. They don't have to do anything. They just think it and they're there.
Yeah.
Like they mentioned that in the narration of it.
And from then on, we see Barbie driving to the beach. And we get this funny little monologue. They're like, oh, Barbie has a good day every day. But Ken only has a good day if Barbie looks at him. Which it's crazy because like we already see this whole insecurity of in men and the masculinity part of it. Because like he's basing his whole day off of if Barbie looks at him, if she gives him attention.
Yeah, and I felt like that pissed off people automatically.
You think
Like
so?
that was a very bold statement to start with. Because I feel like, if we think about it, like men are gonna be like, I don't think about her. Like I have other things to think about.
Yes, you do.
I have other things to think about. I have better things to do, you
Yeah.
know? So I feel like, again, it captures this like kind of vague, deep-rooted kind of thing that we know, but nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. And also, if you haven't seen this movie, all the Barbies are named Barbie. They just have different roles. So like Margot Robbie is stereotypical Barbie. Some of them are like author Barbies or like spaceship Barbies, whatever, right?
Nobel Prize Barbie.
Nobel Prize Barbies. And all the Kens are just Kens, right? So you get Ryan Gosling's Ken, and he's the one that if he doesn't have a good day if Barbie doesn't look at him or whatever. And it's funny because as she's coming up, he's like, "Hey Barbie," and she says hi back. And the other Ken that he kind of has a rivalry with, Simu Liu, he says hi Barbie, and she says hi back, and he's like, "Hey Ken," it's that known rivalry they have there. And at that moment, Ken decides to try to impress Barbie. He's like, "Hey Barbie, check this out," and he's like preparing to like go up to surf, and like everybody's kind of like nervous for him, right? Because his job, as we find out later, is beach.
No role, just
there's
beach.
no role. His job is beach, and so that kind of gives us the whole idea that like he wasn't probably even supposed to go surfing because he probably doesn't know how, but he was trying to impress Barbie. But he runs up to the water, and we also see Michael Cera's character, Alan, which he's the only Alan, and I think we'll get to that later as to why he's the only one. But he runs up to the waves, and even Alan's like, "Ken, no!" And Ken bounces off the waves and like hurts himself. So they all run to his aid, and he's like, "Barbie, how much did you see of that?" He's like, "Everything." He's like, "Cool." Right? So like he got his point across, but whatever. She's giving him attention, which is what he wanted. And again, we get into this whole like superficial, artificial like concept because a bunch of the Barbies turn into
And like a bunch of validation.
Yeah. And even then, a bunch of the Barbies like come up to. They all of a sudden become nurses, right? They all come up to him and they're like, "Oh, you're fine." And the time it took me to tell you they were fine, you're already healed.
Yeah.
Like, what is that?
Perfect world.
Perfect world. And I think from then, Ken is like, "Oh, Barbie, like, what are you doing tonight? Can I come over?" And he's like crossing his fingers.
Like, I'm having a party.
She's like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Yes," and he's like, "I'm just having a big old party that we have every night. No big deal." Like we're like, okay. So he skips to the party and like it's a rager.
Yeah.
Everybody's dancing, having a good time. Ken and his little boys are going up to the dance floor and trying to impress everybody, right? And it seems like everything's super cool. Like this is a party I would go to. It seems fun, right? And all of a sudden, Barbie is dancing and she's like, "You guys ever think about death?" And the whole party just like stops. You hear the record scratch and everybody's just staring at her.
What's death?
Yeah, and like, cause that apparently, this is unheard of. You don't think about these kind of things because everything is perfect.
In this perfect world,
there is no death. Why are you even saying that?
Dying from all this happiness.
Yeah, she says I'm dying to dance. And like the party starts again, they all start screaming, but she makes this face where like
the realization.
She is thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then the party ends and like she's in bed and she's like, "All right, good night, everybody. I'm totally not thinking about death." And then we're like, okay.
Okay.
Right. So then the next morning starts and like, you can already tell there's a difference in her demeanor. She wakes up with like sloppy hair, bedhead, right? And even so in the beginning, there was a song that was playing and everything was so positive, right? But even the lyrics start to change in the song.
I didn't notice that.
You didn't notice that? Yeah, even the lyrics started to change like some kind of negativity. So she gets up, she takes her fake shower, and the water's cold. It's like, okay, that's weird. She gets down to make her breakfast. The toast is burnt. The butter like misses. She sits down. She pours her milk. She looks at it and it's expired. Right. She walks off the house and she falls.
Oh yes, because her foot.
No, she was floating, right? And so I guess that magic, whatever, kind of just dissipates and she fell. But then later, she tries to stand up and she falls over because she got flat feet. And everybody's like, ugh. Yeah, so she goes to the beach and all the Barbies like, "Oh, let's go, like play volleyball, whatever." And she's like, "Yeah, I'll be there in a minute." She takes off her feet and falls over. And she goes to the bench. They all come towards her and like, "Oh, what's wrong?" She's like, "I'm embarrassed to say it, but like I have flat feet." And she shows them, and they're all like, "Flat feet." Even one of the cans like sees, he's like, ugh. They're all like, it's disgusting apparently. And she's like, "I don't know what's going on with me. Like, why is this happening?" And one of the Barbies is like, "Oh, you're malfunctioning. You need to go see who?
Weird Barbie.
Weird Barbie." And how do you become a weird Barbie, Shy?
You get played about too much, and then they break you. They literally just start shaving off your head and splitting you in half. Whatever.
You look weird, bro. Yeah. Like you're just a weird Barbie. And she's like, "Ew, like, why is she always in the splits and this and that?" Like,
and they're like, "Well, we call her weird into her face and behind her back, But yeah, weird Barbie.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
So Barbie decides to go to Weird Barbie's house, and the minute she goes up, Weird Barbie's like was cooking good looking in like in the splits, and she like that's how she like walks basically. And she's like, "Okay, so like, what can I help you with? You're here for a reason." And she's like, "Oh, well, my feet are flat,
it's
right?
Like, it's nothing, just a little,
just a little flat feet, and like some thoughts of death." And she's like, "Thoughts of death? What do you mean?" Like, and so I guess basically the whole concept of this basically creates a wormhole between the real world and Barbie land. And so Weird Barbie explains that, like, in order for this to be fixed, Barbie needs to go to the real world and find whoever's playing with her, because those emotions that the real girl is feeling are reflecting into Barbie and coming into Barbie land, right? And that's what's messing her up. And I think it's really funny because the Weird Barbie is like, you have two choices. You can either go fix what's happening, or you can stay here and forget everything. What are you going to choose? And right away, she's like, I'm going to forget everything. I'm just going to go about my day. She's like, no, like, you need to go fix this. Barbie's like, no, I just want to forget. And she's like, kid, like, you need to go fix this.
You don't have a choice.
You don't have a choice. I just made you feel like you had control of something, but you don't. Like, you need to go fix this.
He's like, why didn't you give me the choice anyway?
Seriously. And so obviously she I think the process of getting to the real world is funny because she has to go, like, skiing. She has to drive somewhere, ski through some snow, like go on a boat, like go, like fly. It's a whole process. She has
process,
to go to
outer space and all that.
Yeah, and she the only way to get back is like to do it in reverse, but whatever. But we discover that when she's on her journey, Ken actually sneaks into her car, right? And they like freak out. She's like, Ken, like, it kind of goes back to the whole idea of him wanting her attention. She's like, I have to do this by myself. And he's like, oh, but like, the guy said I wouldn't go with you and this and that. Like, you don't want me to come. And it gets into this whole argument. She's like, but did you bring your skates? And he's like, I never leave without them. Because getting the skates or skating is part of like the whole process of getting back and getting in. So once they enter the real world, they're actually like wearing some really like retro 80s kind of clothes.
And you've seen like the marketing off these photos. It's like very 80s bright yellow, like skating down Venice.
And so while they're skating down the street, like everybody's staring at them. And right away, Barbie's like, like, I don't like the looks that people are giving us, right? And Ken's kind of oblivious to it. He's like, oh, I think they like it,
I'm like, we're getting attention.
Yeah, everybody's giving them, like, weird comments and weird vibes. And then even, like, there's a gay couple that walks by and they're like, ooh, that looks good. And the Ken's like, see, they like us. Like, and so they're trying to, like, kind of figure out what they're doing, where they need to go. And
Barbie's getting objectified, too.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
From everybody.
She's getting, like, catcalled and this and that. People are making, like, sexual comments towards her. And it's kind of going over her head for the most part. And then they see a construction site, and they're like, oh, let's get a good, like, vibe of women power right here and see what's up. So she asks them, like, oh, like, something about what they're doing or where they can go. And all of them make, like, some sort of sexual comments to her. And she's like, I don't really get what you guys are saying, but some of it, like, seems like it's in a sexual demeanor. But just so you guys know, we don't have genitals. And they're like, okay, that's cool, too, I guess. And then Ken's over here, like, I have all the genitals. Like,
don't worry about me.
Yeah. And as they're skating away, they're kind of trying to figure things out, and Ken's like, it seems like everything's reversed here. Like, guys are kind of in charge, right? And as they're saying that, some dude comes up and, like, smacks Barbie's butt, and she turns around and punches him. They go to jail. They get out. They're like, oh, we need to change clothes. They steal some clothes and go back to jail, and they get released again. And then they're having this little, like, talk outside, and Barbie's like, oh, like, I just need to, like, relax and figure out what I gotta do. I gotta focus on who this person is. And Ken's over here like, what am I gonna do? This is boring. And she's like, go take a walk, Ken. He's like, where am I gonna go? And like, it's a really childish relationship that they have, but it's really funny. And he starts walking off, and she's like, don't go too far. He's like, I won't. It's so childish. But he walks off, and like, he finds himself kind of in a masculine environment, if you will. And he sees guys working out, guys that like have a lot of money or look buff,
and they like smack each other's butt. They're like, "Hey, bro, hey,
yeah,
bro,
yeah."
hey, bro.
And like, it's obviously very appealing to him. And so we shoot back to Barbie, and oh no, actually, I believe we get a shot, our first shot of Mattel, and the FBI gives one of the like secretaries a call, and he's like, "Hey, like we got a report of two dolls walking around Venice. Like, you guys need to fix this." And so he goes up to where the CEOs and like the big wigs are basically, and the secretary for them is actually America Ferrera, and we see her drawing some irregular Barbie designs, right? Which kind of gives us a little hint into what happens later. And the secretary guy's like, hey, like I need to go in there and talk to them, and she's like, you can't. And he's like, well, I'm going to. So he goes in anyways, and the CEO is actually Will Ferrell.
I love his character.
Which is, I think it was a good choice. He really has that crazy vibe to him, which I think was appropriate for this movie. But it's him and probably like 10 other guys that are in charge,
suits,
right? 10 suits. And they're basically like, why did you bother us? We're having like a really huge discussion right now. And he's like, oh, like, can I give it to you guys in a whisper? And they're like, okay, give it to me in a whisper. So they're all whispering towards him. And inevitably, Will Ferrell finds out that there's Barbies walking around. They kind of freak out because apparently they had another incident recently where it kind of got out of control, but they fixed it. And so essentially they say that the only way to fix this problem is to get Barbie reset back into a box. And so once we see that happen, we go back into Barbie. She's sitting at this bus stop and kind of just focusing on what's going on around her.
She's trying to like remember who plays with her.
Who plays with her, basically. And at first, we see Sasha, right? So, we later find out is America Ferrera's daughter. And initially, we think that she's the one that's playing with Barbie. So
you
Barbie's
see like these childhood memories.
Yeah.
Like,
As she's growing up, too. So we assume that it's her. And Ken comes back and he's like, Barbie, like, you gotta tell you what I found out. And she's like, yeah, me too. Let's go first, or you go first. We'll go at the same time. And they go 1, 2, 3, and Barbie says, I know where we need to go. And he's like, men rule the world. She's like, what? And he's like, what? And she's like, we need to go to the school. He's like, yes, the school. Let's go. Kind of just waving off what he said, right?
And like right before, there's the moment where there's an old lady sitting next to her, like on the bus stop next, and she's like, she looks at her and she smiles, and she kind of takes in the whole scenery, and she's like, I feel like she understands like it's beautiful, but also kind of like this sense of like uncomfortability.
Reality.
Yeah, and reality, uncomfortability, same
Seriously?
thing. Yeah, and what's it called? She looks at her, she's like, you're beautiful, and she's like, I know it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like this like agreement, like, you know, you're beautiful who you are regardless of age and all of that. And a lot of people say that was like a really like pivotal moment in the film. I don't really agree, but yeah,
I can see why.
Yeah, I definitely do, but I feel like again, like they're hitting this point, but they're not actually like
setting into it and like diving into that kind of theme. Yeah,
it's like okay, like unless you like really think about it, it's like, okay, she said this old lady's pretty.
Okay, and what?
Yeah,
like, what then? Now what? Like,
yeah, that's
now
it.
what do we do?
Like there's, you have to really think about it to think what is the true intention of this message.
Yeah.
Maybe there isn't even a message. Who knows? Yeah. And then we continue on, and she goes to the school, and she's like, okay, I need to go to, like, I need to find the girl who plays with me, like, go off.
Yeah.
And he's like roaming the school, and she sees the girl, and right before she goes to Sasha, someone stops her, and she's like, you can't go up to Sasha. Like, why not? And she's like, she's going to like rip you to shreds. Like nobody goes up to Sasha. And she's like, well, I'm Barbie. Like I could go up to Sasha. Like everybody loves me. And she was like, you're gonna get your feelings hurt.
Yeah.
And she goes up to Sasha and like says like, hi, I'm Barbie. I'm the woman who inspires you. And she's like, yeah, like whatever. She was like that true like Gen Z teen angst. She was like, what the fuck is this? Yeah, literally. And like her friends are like you gotta tell her, Sasha, rip her to shreds, like do it. And then she like basically goes on this monologue where she talks about like, you set unrealistic like standards for women, you destroyed like all this like sense of feminism, like people have the worst insecurities because of you. And that was kind of like that first sense of like the real world to Barbie. And she's like hysterical and she cries and she runs off. And then you see Ken kind of just going through the school and just like he runs into this woman and like they're having this whole discussion. He runs into her like 2 more times and she's like, oh fuck, I gotta avoid him. Like
this guy again.
Like fucking shit. Okay, we gotta go to talk to strangers. And then Mattel finds them like at the school and they're like, we just have to take you. But they only find Barbie, not Ken, because Ken is still being an idiot roaming around. And what's it called? They're like, yeah, we're gonna take you back to Barbie Land where everything is back to normal. And she's like, okay, because like she's still trying to go.
Yeah.
And what's it called? At this time, Sasha is getting out of school and she gets in the car with America Ferrera, and like America realizes that, and Sasha tells her like, that Barbie, like all that things, and America kind of puts it all together. She's like, wait, like I know who this is, and then like she kind of follows her, and what's it called? They kind of get into the Mattel building and they're trying to put her in the box and she's like trying to speak. She was like, okay, I'll go in, but like, let me speak to your CEO. He's like, I'm the CEO as well. Farrell's like, CFO, like financial, anything. And they're like, it's all men. And she's like, is there a woman in charge? It's like, we've had one like in the 80s or something.
We had one more at another time.
Yeah, it's like, but not anymore. And she's kind of like, okay, this is weird.
Yeah.
And right before she's about to get in, she's like, oh, I need to use the restroom. And she fucking books it. And she's running through this whole like building. And I find this scene super cute and funny. I've actually really enjoyed it. And she's just trying to escape them because she's like obviously still trying to find her owner and all that. And she goes into this like room and she sits with this old woman. And this woman is like telling her like, she basically already knew her. And it's like, I feel like there's something that clicks between like Barbie and this woman where she's like, like
something like familiarity right there. Yeah.
And then she even says like she tells like, oh Barbie, that's how you get out. And then that's where it's kind of like, who is this woman? You get me?
It gives us that mystery feeling of like, who, like you said, who is this woman? What role does she play?
And it's like she already knew who Barbie is, so she knows like what is it?
She knows what's up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what's it called? She gets out of the building, and that's where like America gets her, and she's like, they kind of have that connection where they're like,
They look at each other.
Yeah,
like,
it's like that was her doll. She's like, those are your memories. And then she was like, yeah, like that's where they do this whole connection. And she's like telling her about like this existential crisis she's having. She's like, wait, I draw those. And then that's where that connection comes in, where they're like, you're my owner and all that.
Yeah.
And she trying to explains to her like what's going on and why, like what's happening. And they're like, okay, we have to go back to Barbie Land and we have to find Ken. And they go through this whole journey. And like Sasha being the teenager she is, she's like, fuck this.
She's not having it. Yeah, she's not having it at all.
She's just an angry teenager. Yeah. And what's it called? Ken is just living it up. Like, he's like, wow, men rule the world. Wow, men are so powerful. I got to take this back to Barbie Land.
Yeah.
So he goes back to Barbie Land to fucking bring the patriarchy over there. And they're going on their journey back to Barbie Land. And then what's it called? Mattel is following them too. And you see them going through the roller skates and going through the whole process.
All like 15 of them.
Yeah,
like,
it was pretty funny.
it's funny.
Yeah, and what's it called? They're kind of showing like this is a scene where like they're going through Barbie Land. And when Margot Robbie is like introducing everything, she's like, huh, that's kind of weird. You know, like there's these little differences where like the big one was like all the women are serving the men brewskis.
Brewski beers.
I'm like, my shirt, beer never broke my heart.
There you go.
And what's it called? She's kind of like, that's weird. Like, that's weird. Like, everything's just a little off. It's all women serving men.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is not how it actually is. And, like, the women are so, like, programmed. Like, yeah, I love doing this.
I love serving beer.
Yeah.
I love serving my man this and that.
And it's like, I love rubbing his feet. Alan loves rubbing his feet. Like, no, I don't.
The real one, Alan.
Like, no, I don't. What the fuck is going on? I love Alan. And from there, like, she goes back to her house and, like, Ken walks in. And he's like, this is Kenland.
Well, as they're walking up, they realize a lot of the dream houses are different because of Ken.
Kenland, baby.
Kenland,
Kenland.
yeah.
And what's it called? Ken has his little monologue where he is like, I am nobody here. And then when I went into the real world, I was somebody. I
was
mattered.
respected.
Yeah, I was like admired and this and that. Here, I'm just waiting for you. And it's like, that's not what I want to do. I want to have control. We deserve to control. And it's like, we're kind of shown like this lack of identity and kind of how like, again, we're seeing like these polar opposites. Like the Barbie world is woman ruled and the real world is men ruled. And the most vague, like generalized way. But what's it called? He just wanted to be equal. And honestly, I feel like he throws a tantrum. Like the whole
bit.
he throws a tantrum. And I feel like we'll talk about that later. But anyway, they're continuing on and then Barbie
Well, was that when he has this whole fit where he was like, you failed me, and he goes into his monologue about like you said, he wasn't respected and like she didn't respect him. He basically had enough of it. You know,
he has no sense of identity or nothing, and he's like tired of waiting for her. Yeah, and she then is just like crying, and they're trying to change the constitution, and like you see the news, they're like it's gonna be Kenland, and you can't do nothing about it, and because like all the Barbies are programmed, so it's like you can't break that, and she's just like broken, like she's literally face down
in the grass.
Like fucking, and they're trying to like get her motivated, and she's like, I don't want to do nothing. Like
I'm gonna wait for one of the more like superior Barbies to come and help out and change things back to how they were.
Yeah, she just gave up on herself. Like, absolutely. And like you see her in Weird Barbie's house, and like they're trying to pick her up, and then like America goes on to like tell her it's like women, it's very hard being a woman. You have to be like very sweet, but you also have to be assertive. You can't be too bossy, you can't be this, you can't be too skinny, but you can't be too thick. And this like whole like monologue where we really compare ourselves, where we have to be just enough when we're really never enough. And that snaps her out of it, and she's like deprogrammed. And because there's other Barbies around there, they also deprogram, and they're like, that's it. That's the thing. Yeah, you have to put the fucking two brain cells to rub together to work, to actually take away the patriarchy. And they're like, so we have to deprogram all the Barbies to actually like get the Kens to like go against each other. And again, another sense of like almost foreshadowing of just like real life and like history, how we've seen as just like when men just start getting like, when we pin them against each other, they won't realize what's happening around them. I feel like that's what they're trying to play. And then they come up with this plan where Barbie's gonna, you know, win over his heart. Like Ken, he's like, baby, I'm back. You know, stupid. I'm sorry. She shows up to his house, and I love the scene where he's just like drops everything, fucking falls over. Yes, and he was like, I was just reading, and the book's like fucking upside down and shit. And like she asked him out. She's like, I was stupid. I never saw you for who you are. Like, let's go out, kind of thing. And it kind of shows them going out, and then this like the transition of the scene where they're all by like this fire pit. This campfire.
They're all singing the same song to her.
Fucking Nickelback too, out of all like fucking songs. It's a Nickelback song. And it's all of them singing the same thing to all like the Barbies. And then you see like stereotypical Barbie like text someone and they kind of just start switching around. And you can see they're getting like bothered. They're not focusing on them. They're moving around and they're like, what the fuck? And what's it called? The kind of scene transitions, like they kind of like all meet up and they're like, what's going on? Like, what is this? And they're like, we have to fight the other Kens. They're the one taking her from us. Like, they're the real enemy. And they're kind of just going, like, having this blonde moment where they're like, but we're Ken. You're Ken. How are we going to know who to battle? It's like, you'll know. It's like this and this. And
so after that, they literally get into the fight scene after that. It starts with, so we have, like, Simu Liu's Ken army, and then we have Ryan Gosling's Ken army. And so the whole fight scene is a song. Right, and so when they start fighting, like, there's no real weapons in Barbie Land. They're all fighting with, like, hockey sticks or, like, they're throwing frisbees and they literally, like, twist somebody 360 and then breaks their neck or whatever. But you even see Mattel walking up through this fight scene and they're kind of getting in the crossfires too. But even as they're fighting, they get into this, like, really whole macho monologue. Not even monologue, but, like,
song?
just macho song, really. And, like, it transitions into a Footloose kind of thing, right? Where like
dance battle?
A dance battle.
They're literally LARPing.
Yeah, but towards the end of it, they're like in agreement with each other. But one of Ryan Gosling's like little guys, he's like, "Oh, like Ken, weren't we supposed to vote on the Constitution today?" And he was like, "Oh, that was today, huh?" And then from there, it skips to they're at the White House or the pink White House, whatever, the Capitol, and it's all the Barbies, and they're like, "Oh, all in favor of keeping the original Constitution, say aye," and it's all the Barbies, they all say aye. So Barbie Land stays Barbie Land, and from there, they all kind of go back to their dream houses, and the Kens go up to where their Mojo Doja Casa houses were, and they're like, "Oh, like these look different, this and that," and we see that all the Barbies are back in their original place, basically, and so Barbie and them kind of explain what happened. Like, they kind of explain that they were the ones that pitted them against each other and this and that. And the Kens kind of lock arms and like, okay, like who are we fighting? And Ryan Gosling's Ken kind of has an episode and breaks down and runs into Barbie's house. He's like, "Don't look at me!" As he's running in there. We can't help to not look. And he goes up to Barbie goes actually go up to try to console him or whatever. And she's like, "Oh, like Ken, like what's wrong, you know?" And he gets into his whole like
tantrum
and like he was like, "I just wanted you to love me," and like I didn't even really like the patriarchy, I just thought it was cool and this and that, you know. And they get into this whole like, "Well, Ken, like you need to figure out who you are without me." And he brings up the whole like, "What's Barbie and Ken? And
I'm nothing without you.
Nothing without you. That's what I was made for."
And he keeps trying to kiss her and she's like,
he's
"No,
like, no, that's not what I meant."
And then he's like, "No,"
and he slaps himself.
Yeah, he's like, "I'm a failure.
Yeah.
I'm a failure." Yeah. And what's it called? She just has like explains to him it's like we could basically coexist, but we have each other's identity.
Yeah.
And she also like makes a point like, "I didn't appreciate you. I didn't give you enough credit.
She
I didn't."
apologized
Yeah, she's like, "I shouldn't have done that to you. Like I have to treat you like an equal." And he kind of has this moment where it's like he just wanted that validation from her specifically, and he got it. And it's kind of like, okay, you know, I guess this is how it's gonna be. And they kind of like they all come back together, and I think it's with Mattel too, where they're like, "Well, we could like share some sort of government." And Mattel was like, "Okay, we'll do everything's gonna be back to normal." And they're like, "Well, I don't think everything should go back to normal. I think like Ken shouldn't live in the shadow of Barbie. I think they should both be equal and have like a happy life here."
Yeah.
And they were like trying to like make a joke about the local government. They're like, "Can we have a role in the Supreme Court?" It's like, no, we could do like local government.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we'll take it.
One,
can we wear
one
tights?
Ken in the local government.
And it's like, okay. It's like, can we wear robes? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess. So like,
They're
I
all
guess.
happy about it.
Yeah, and it's like kind of like, what's it called? America was like, "Oh, I have an idea." Like her daughter's like, "Tell them the idea." It's like, "What about an everyday Barbie? Like, you know, like tired Barbie, mom Barbie, like this Barbie." And he's like, "Yeah, that works. Like, yeah, you know what?
That's gonna
Like,
make money.
Yeah, that's good." And like we saw actually like the real Barbies that came out, like all the different kind of disabilities and different ages and races and all of that. And what's it called? Will Ferrell is just like, now I could like really strive and be this like important person, and like he's having a whole moment. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, this is my like moment. And then like Sasha's like, "What about Barbie?" And he's like, what happens
about
to
her?
her? Yeah, and she's like, "I don't really feel like I belong anywhere."
Yeah.
And it's like, "What do you want?" And she's kind of just like, "I just want to exist," basically. And then
That's when Ruth comes back.
yeah, and she's like, "Well, that's the point. That's why I made you. You could do whatever the hell you want. Like, you're just a version of like a woman, or what you could be whatever you want to
Yeah.
be. That was like really the monologue that she was telling her. It's like the world is in your hand.
Yeah.
You could do whatever you want to do. And like the scene ends with her going to the gynecologist.
Yeah. It's just over like that. Like,
Yeah,
I
it's
thought it was
like
really funny.
I have genitals, I swear.
Yeah.
I have genitals. Yeah. And that was like the end of the movie, and then they show like all these old like Barbie dolls, like the history of it, and it's pretty cute. And it was an enjoyable movie. 7 out of 10 now.
Yeah, I for sure gave it a 7 out of 10, but I think, like I said, my initial thoughts going into it, just because it was a fun movie to watch, you know. Again, I didn't think about it politically until I watched it the second time. But even then, I still gave it a 7 out of 10. I just thought it was really funny. It was enjoyable. I saw it 3 times now.
I think I've seen it 4 or 5.
It is definitely a rewatchable movie.
Yes, I do agree. Yeah, because you can still catch like other little jokes. You can see the little other things. You just it's definitely a rewatchable movie. But I do think it could get boring kind of fast. Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of those jokes are like one timers. You watch it again, you're like, it was funny the first time, but
I took like a week break after watching it,
really?
and I was like,
dude, I think we saw it twice in the same like.
Oh yeah, literally.
No, I think actually the next day, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I watched it after you mentioned. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll watch it. What do you think is like the controversy with this movie? Like, you know,
I've heard a lot of different things,
Okay.
honestly. There's a whole idea of white feminism in this movie. There's a whole
idea.
Your idea, the whole idea of which I really focused on or got from it was the whole idea of all these Kens are so like insecure and fall into the same patterns with each other, trying to fit in with each other. And then you have Alan, who, from what I've seen and read, is supposed to be the actual representation of a man because he was the only one that wasn't conforming to what the Kens wanted. He was the one that actually had an opinion for himself. He was the one that was defending the women when they needed it. So it's like I said, the first time I watched it, I didn't think about that. But going into it again, I'm kind of like, okay, like, I see that.
Yeah.
You know? So I think those three are probably the biggest ones for
And
me.
Alan doesn't look like the rest of them,
No.
though. He looks very average Joe.
He looks basic.
Yeah.
You know?
But I feel like that's what you appreciate more about him. It's like he's just like the rest of us.
Yeah.
There's no sense of perfection
Nothing
with
really
him.
special.
Yeah, no. Honestly, this movie had so many different, like, it got a lot of positive reviews, yes, but when we hear the negative reviews, it's like they're like men aren't manly, and I'm like, I could understand that, but again, it's like you're not going to see this movie to see manly men.
Yeah.
Like
It's called Barbie for a reason.
That's
like,
one of the biggest thing. It's like, why would you assume this would be like a very like hyper masculine movie when it's literally like the total opposite?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. That was a big thing. The white feminist one was the first thing that like really stuck out to me because I just couldn't relate to this movie. I really couldn't because like everybody was talking about it, how it's so empowering. It's like the feminist movie of this generation. And I was like, how? I don't know. I didn't find it very intersectional. Like, okay, they had such an opportunity to make a diverse cast.
Yeah.
There was literally 2 like black Barbies.
Yeah.
That's it.
You know, me and Carla were talking about it too. There were no, as far as we saw, no Hispanic men.
I actually don't think I noticed that either.
Yeah.
It's like there was no diversity. It's like they almost kind of picked people that looked the same and they just kind of like copied and pasted.
Copy and paste.
Yeah, that's literally it.
Seriously.
And that was like a thing that bugged me because like, okay, like I mentioned it to you. It's like, okay, we're going to put a black Barbie in there and we're going to show like this inequality, but it's like, why are we not tapping into that in the real world? Like in the real world, and like when they're showing that, there was not a single like black woman shown, not at all. It was like, yeah, we saw Hispanic women, but even then they were
It
light
was like
skinned.
just her. Mostly
her
daughter, maybe some of her friends.
Yeah, but it's like even then they were like light skinned
Yeah.
too. So I'm like, okay. And even with like the relationship between like the mom and daughter, it's so like it's not even realistic as well. You know, it's kind of like what we want. Like that little grouping, because as a Hispanic woman, you know, there is sometimes that little struggle with your mom because, you know, women have different kind of roles, especially like if you're from the motherland and all that. So I was just like, for you to like be so close to your mom like that, I was just like,
that doesn't happen.
I know,
Like,
literally. So I was just kind of like sad because there's no sense of relatability in
Yeah.
this. It's like, okay, we're talking about the patriarchy. Okay, what about it? Oh, men have all these powerful roles. I'm like, okay, but you're not really acknowledging that the women also do too. But again, it's like, that was the first time I watched it. I was like, okay, why? It's just like, it's very goofy. And yeah, I understand that's the point of it, but I was just like, okay, how is this like a feminist icon movie if you're not hitting the points? You're not talking about the discrimination, the inequality, like all the real life struggles. And again, I understand this is just like a silly little movie, but I don't think it should be labeled like the feminist movie of the fucking generation.
It just kind of goes back to how we said in the beginning, like, it has these really serious tones and topics in it, but like they're just not touched on at all.
And like when Sasha talks about Barbie, like saying like, oh, they ruined all these like how women are supposed to see themselves and this and that. I'm like, I don't think, like, again, people didn't view Barbie like that. The actual sense of insecurity, hate, this is all taught. This is all like what we grasp from how people treat us. So it's like, again, Barbie was more of an escape, in my opinion. It was like how you escape. You're a kid. You don't really think about these things. Like when you go to school, when you hit criticism from like your family, like people, that's where you have to like compare yourself to this doll because all you see is stereotypical Barbie. That's where you kind of like learn this hateful thing. And like even then, I don't even think Barbie was really like a hated like kind of figure until like recently, within the past like 15 years. Like people were like, fuck Barbie. And again, like even this movie is such an in-your-face irony because like Mattel made this movie. They're the one who wanted this movie because they wanted to revamp Barbies because Barbies are dying. And it's like they talk about all these different things that are like serious issues that happen, but they make joke of it. And
like
that's
it's not a big deal, but it really is.
And it's like, what? I don't know. That's also something that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. It's like, yeah, we know we did all this, but see, like we made this movie to kind of make a joke out of it. And it's like, again, minimalizing the things that we've been through as like, women of color, people of color, just this whole sense of like struggle, So that's like the thing that also kind of was just like, okay, like I felt like this whole movie was a cash grab.
Sure. No, I agree with you 100%.
It was like just a straight up cash grab. There was no actual like, it wasn't deep. It wasn't like...
There was almost no point to it.
Yeah,
you know? Like there is, but there isn't.
Like
more towards there isn't.
Absolutely. Because again, like I didn't get the feminist point. I didn't like feel touched, moved. Like when people are saying they're sobbing during this movie, I was like, how?
I didn't get that.
How? Because
I'm also not a girl, but I was like...
I don't know. I just didn't see the depth in it. This movie wasn't like deep. It was like, and like the point of Greta, like when she was making this movie, was like to be in your face. And she did that. And I think that's literally the reason why it was so successful. And also we have to acknowledge there are other women directors that have made more like meaningful pieces and it
better movies.
And like it kind of just annoys me. Okay, like this white woman got all the credit and she's considered a feminist icon. And again, it's not speaking for intersectional feminism. It's just speaking for a white woman. And again, it's like we're seeing this story of the real world, this real shock, and it's like, how much of like a reality does a thin, pretty, blonde white woman need? You know, like I was reading articles about it, and I was just like, yeah, like you kind of missed the fucking point. Like, I feel like it would have been just even better if we at least saw the real world. You know, a little bit more realistic. And again, I'm like heavily mentioning this. I get the point, but I just feel like they could have just added a little bit more to really hit this other sense of diversity, because I feel like they're really just trying to get that Gen Z crowd. You know, they're like, let's get mad about something. Let's be like...
Just because.
This is the thing that I felt like described the movie the best. It felt like an infographic that I see on Instagram. That was like one of the first things that I saw. It was like, you know, when you go on Instagram for that, what's it called? I forgot the word. It's like a type of activism where it's like, you just show it. You're not actually an activist. And that's what I felt like it was. It was just kind of like, you know, feminism. It's like, people don't even like feminists.
Like an infomercial almost?
Yes,
like...
exactly. And it's like people, like feminists are the fucking butt of the joke right now because of the fucking red pill community too. So I'm just like, what? Like, I just feel like we were made into a bigger joke. You know, like, we're still fighting for these rights. We're still like, dude, we're going back. So I just feel like now we're kind of even viewed less, because now when people see like this movie, they're thinking everybody's like crazy, like the people who made Barbie. Like they love Barbie because they agree with it, they believe it, and that's why. And I'm just like, I feel like we just got made into a joke now, and that's not like, I don't know. I felt like it was supposed to be a little bit more serious, but
No,
you know.
yeah, for sure. I think that goes back into what I was saying about like when I watched it the first time, I was hoping there would be more serious moments.
Mm-hmm.
But you watch it if you haven't seen it, like we've been saying, there's literally I think at the most time we got a serious moment, maybe 2 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, dude, there was
You know,
no screen
even
time for
then,
actual
like-
seriousness. It's just like it just minimized
Like
it.
like it's almost you're getting into your feels about it, but then like it turns into a joke again.
Yeah.
Like you said, so there's really no time to really
process.
what's going on, embracing it and taking it in. Like, I think with most movies that have serious tones, you have the time, or even more serious scenes that give you the time to process these things and take these feelings in. But with Barbie, it's like
I feel
it
like
just
we
comes
felt
and
that
goes
with
so
Oppenheimer. Sorry to
quick.
cut you off.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
I feel like you and I. Well, I looked at you all the time. I was like,
I know, crying throughout half the movie. Like,
Shh, we'll talk about that later.
We'll
But
talk
yes,
about
I
that
was
later,
crying.
yeah.
I felt like because there was a story that has more depth, we were actually able to process the seriousness of as everything was happening
and connect with it.
Yeah,
you know?
and like almost like when we described Oppenheimer, like how I told you, I felt like I was actually reading the book.
Mhm.
Like I felt like I was reading a history book and imagining how it was playing with my own. Like that's how I just feel like I wish Barbie kind of made me feel a little bit. Like
Sure.
really try to like think about like my life, my issues, and like see like wow,
Put
I could
yourself
make
in
yeah.
there and-
I'm like yeah, I could do it. I'm like I didn't,
You didn't
feel
feel
it.
that.
Yeah, I didn't feel any inspired. Oppenheimer definitely did that for me.
Last one. I don't know if you mentioned it, but how did you feel about how Barbie treated Ken throughout the entire movie?
We did try to talk about this a little bit. It feels like they're both kind of just like these vague, like generalized ideas because like how Barbie's treated the Kens, it was like they ain't shit, men ain't
Yeah.
shit, and we like talked about it. It's like they kind of just like blissfully ignoring them. And I feel like that's kind of like the attitude we have now, like especially as with modern women, like we see like men ain't shit, fuck men, this and that.
I don't need anybody. I'm independent. And
Yes, even though we still search for, like, we may not admit it, but male validation because it's the only way to actually show importance in this world as a woman because of the patriarchy. Because it's like you have to be validated by a man to show importance so they could view you as an equal. So I felt like that was some themes in there. And then we see men just kind of like have no sense of self, and they like there's a scene where it's like you can't be your girlfriend.
Yeah.
And it's like we see that as well, like in like very toxic relationships, like they just kind of get consumed with each other and there's no sense of like self, and like it's very codependent. So I feel like we saw those kinds of themes and like ideas there. So like the treatment was almost just seeing like it's a cartoon version of a toxic relationship.
I was about to say, yeah.
It's like that's really it. It
No,
was
I
just-
agree with you. Like, I definitely one for me. Obviously, I don't like the way Barbie treated Ken, but it kind of goes back to what you were saying. Like, it was so codependent on each other, more for the Kens. But with Barbie, it was just this whole idea of like there was almost no respect for the Kens, right?
But if you realize, Barbie was always looking for Ken too. Like there was a sense of kind of like, where's Ken? Even though like he's with her, I feel like we kind of do that too as well with our partners. We're kind of like the sense of like maybe we don't appreciate, maybe we're kind of like being like toxica or whatever,
Sure.
and like then it's like, well, this is still my person,
Because even in that scene where Mattel gets her and tries to put her back in the box, she's like, "Oh, maybe we should get Ken first." And they're like, "We're not worried about Ken," which I think kind of gives us even the idea that like we're more focused. They're obviously more focused on the women, but like even how they see Ken's like they're not really worried about the Kens, because we even see a scene when they're pulling up into Barbie Land with Sasha and America Ferrera. Sasha's like, "Oh, where do the Kens sleep?" And Barbie's like, "I don't know. I've never thought about that." And to me, that was kind of like almost waving them off and being considerate about what they do in their own time, because all we see is what Barbie does. So
yeah. It's just a funny like way they actually portrayed like those things that we kind of know but we don't talk about, and they put it on a big screen so we could all see it.
Yeah.
I feel like it was just a good representation of like, again, those thoughts that we have, like those things that we think about, and it's like, that internalized feeling, just very much put on the big screen.
yeah, for sure. Well, my overall review, like I said, 7 out of 10. It was a fun watch for sure. A lot of political views on it, although they aren't deep rooted
Yeah.
into this movie.
And I feel like the opinions that are political are also not very deep rooted into the movie. I feel like they kind of missed the point. You know, I feel like, again, everybody just wanted a movie to be mad about.
Yeah.
Like something that will rile them up and be like, yeah, we have this. And then like Sound of Freedom came out again and just like, yeah. So I feel like it's kind of like this little fucking battle off, you know, getting something for each other. But yeah, for me, it was a 6 out of 10. But after like kind of changing the perspective, it was a 7 out of 10. It's a fun little watch. I feel like everybody should see it at least once to really say you saw it too.
Yeah, for sure.
But probably would not watch it again after this. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, it's just not a movie that really enticed me.
Yeah, I think maybe it's one of those movies. Like I said, I think I told you earlier. I'll watch it maybe once in a while.
Yeah, but it's not like something I'm gonna like.
Look
this
for.
is this is not my comfort movie. No, but
sure.
I'm like happy that a lot of people did find comfort in this and did feel inspired as a woman or as a person. You know, that was a good little message in that.
Definitely. I guess it's gonna wrap up our Barbie episode. We mentioned earlier in our intro episode that we do have a comment section in our Spotify. So let us know what you guys think. Did you guys like this movie? Did you guys not like it? How did you rate it out of 10? What are some political views that you guys saw in this movie, or even maybe some details we didn't see?
Yeah, what are some things that, like, maybe there are some themes that we were just too close-minded to see, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, even though we watched it, like, how many fucking times?
And we think very similarly, so I'm sure there are things that we didn't see. So if you guys want to tell us, please feel free. Give us feedback.
Absolutely. And that concludes our episode. Stay tuned. What movie will we do next?
We are doing Oppenheimer next.
Barbenheimer.
Again, we're releasing these 2 episodes on the same day, so if you're listening to one of these, you obviously made a choice over the other. Or go listen to both.
Absolutely, listen to both, because Oppenheimer was my movie, dude. It hit. Oh, I'm gonna cry again.
This guy.
We actually saw it in 70mm IMAX here at the Chinese
we're
theater.
We're gonna talk about that experience.
Oh, it was great. All right.
Once again, we are Metal with a shot of dopamine. I'm Armando.
I'm Shy.
We'll see you guys next time.
Bye bye.